Welcome back, everyone. My name is International Master Mike Ivanov, and I would like to start a new video series today called Opening Ideas in Chess. So, throughout my many years of playing tournament chess, I've done a lot of opening research in all kinds of directions d4, e4, c4, everything you care to mention, including knight f3 that we look at today. Um, I've used up some of the opening preparation, but the vast majority is still in my databases, which has a lot of innovations and novelties that I would like to share with you guys because I hope that you can use it too. My only request is if you get to play me and if I come out of my semi-retirement in classical chess, I hope you don't use it against me, but everything else is yours for the taking. So let's start off with the Nimzo-Larsen attack today, which is knight f3 and b3. Um, b3 first move is a different question, which I can cover in another video. There are many interesting ideas there, but I would like to show you how to play against this move order, where they start with the knight and then go for b3. The real Nimzo-Larsen is when they go for bishop b2 and try to take out the bishop on this diagonal. If they go for a double fianchetto, it's a different setup, but it's just as harmless, and we can also take a look at it in this video. But the main idea that we're going for is this triangle with c5, d6, and e5. This really hurts the bishop on b2, okay? And we're going to take a look at how white can try and stop the triangle, and the refutation is going to be there in that direction, okay? So if they start with knight f3, I suggest we go for knight f6 as well. And if they play b3, then we could play d6, but then they have the added option of d4, turning it into some sort of Zukertort, all right, after bishop b2, bishop b2. So c5 is actually a move that goes against d4, and it takes out a lot of their options, right? They can turn it into an English, but this sort of English is very innocent as well. We can play d6, and again, after bishop b2, we get our main triangle. And what I'm going to show in this video is once you get the triangle against this bishop, if they can't break out of the triangle, then they're in trouble. Black can already aim for advantage and can even play it in King's Indian fashion with the bishop on g7. Now, the main thing they can do is bishop to b2, right? And we can get this position in many move orders. You can start with c5 and get the same exact position. I would recommend knight f6 if you're not a Sicilian player, right? If you are a Sicilian player, you can get away with knight f3, c5. Okay, finally we get this position and we're going for our triangle. If we get the triangle, we can consider the opening refuted. For example, after e3 and e5, already we can argue that black is better. It's probably closer to equality, but it can be very hard for white to play here because if they go for d4, the whole point is we can take e4, kick away their knight. They have to run back. They don't have much of a choice because there they will get kicked away. And after knight d2, d5, and we got the center and the cramped bishop on b2, who's not having a good time, right? They can still play c4 and try to play it like a French defense, but it's not really that great a French defense because their bishop doesn't really belong here in the French, right? And e3 is more of a threat than in the French, right? We have more center pawns than them. Even if they take this pawn and try to hang on to it, we're not too concerned about that pawn. We can just hold the center, threaten them with e3, and their dark squares are weak. Notice that all these squares are weaker than usual because the bishop is supposed to be covering them, but he's not. He's stuck on b2. So already here, we can say that black is better, okay? Which brings us to the main variation, that being d4, okay? In order to stop our triangle, the triangle of doom on the dark squares, they have to go for d4 early on, right? And after d4, we can take with the pawn. Of course, we should get rid of their center pawn. And if they take with the bishop, that makes no sense. Same thing with the queen, right? I will just kick away the bishop and get a tempo on them. So that's a perfectly good position for black, which brings us to knight takes. If we play for g6, one of their main ideas is to play c4, g3, and turn it into some sort of English, right? After g3, it can be kind of unpleasant. It can still be a typical Nimzo-Larsen attack with d5. So this is one of the main ideas for black here. d5, e5, and it's playable perfectly fine as well. But white can be happy with this sort of double fianchetto, and then they can turn it into something with c4 after takes. I remember seeing castles and knight a3 here as well. They can castle first, and after castling, there's c4 takes and knight a3, which is still equal, but these sort of gambits can be slightly annoying for black. Okay, so for that reason, I'm going to show you something completely different, and that saves you a lot of time in memorizing these lines. So rather than play for a King's Indian setup, we're gonna play e5 right away. Okay, and the whole idea is, where does knight go? If he goes here, that's going to be a very sad sort of failed Sveshnikov Sicilian, right? Because this knight is gonna get kicked back, we're gonna get the center, and that's a failure for white with these two knights here. Okay, so what about knight f3? If they get everything they wanted, like the fianchetto bishop pair, c4, knight c3, they can claim an advantage. They can say our pawn is bad, and they're firing at our hanging pawns in the middle, right? If we just play normal moves, they can play c4, and once again, this sort of English could be a bit annoying, right? Because if you push and they get e3, like for example here, e4, knight d4 is not really what we want. This pawn turns out to be a bit weak on e4. They can play bishop e2, castle short, queen c2, rook c1, rook d1, and we kind of failed in the opening because our bishop is passive and the pawn is weak. Their bishop is very happy to hear this, okay? That's the whole point of the Nimzo-Larsen, is to attack with the bishop. But that's not what we're going for. So I was inspired to take up this line by a game of my friend Mike Zelozny, who was playing International Master Lionel Figueiredo. And Lionel went for this interesting e4, knight d4, and e3, which is playable, right? And we're playing for the coffin. We're trying to bury that bishop on c1 and say that he's never coming out, which is playable. So if they take, d5 is already better, or at least equal, if not better, for black. And if they play here, knight c6, bishop g2, bishop c5, and we're saying these pawns are weak, we can come for these pawns with knight g4, and their structure is ruined, it should be fine for black. The problem is this move f3, and it's still playable. It's very important to play d5 here. If we try anything else, like I think queen a5 was in the game, that's not a great idea in this case, because the queen and the pawn don't work well. Okay, uh, f3 is a very devious move because they can come for our pawn later on, right? They can play knight c3, knight d1, or bishop c1, and they're saying our idea with the coffin doesn't work, right? We can't invade their king side. It's a failure for us. So e3, f3, d5 is still okay. And what we have to know here is this annoying check. All right, we may lose the pawn, but it's a gambit. So this turns into a gambit after knight c6, a bishop d6, and we're saying their queen is weird, their bishop is weird because of this pawn, right? Their king can't castle easy, their dark squares are a bit weak. So it's positional compensation for black, but we do have the Isolani on d5, so it's not so easy for us, right? We have nice bishops, we have easy development. They do have this weird backward pawn on e3, but it's not easy for us to play. So for that reason, I'm going to show you something else against knight d4. Okay, keep in mind that everything up to here has been forced. All right, they don't really have a choice. If they want to avoid my triangle, they have to play d4. They have to play knight f3. So when I say refutation, I mean if they play logical moves, you will get this position. And then you have queen a5 check, which is my recommendation for you today. Why is the check so good? Why do we care for queen a5? Because it really disbalances their harmony, right? We're breaking the harmony of their pieces, and it's hard for them to meet this check. Let me just show you a few notes here. Like if they block with the bishop, looks sort of natural, then I go back and say, hey, what's your bishop up to here? Thanks for letting me develop. And if you go back, then I have just enough time to get the center. First, I will defend e5, and then I can kick you away and go for e3, for example. And once again, your dark squares are weak, and this is a good version of a gambit. Okay, here f3 is not as good because your dark squares are super weak, right? I could probably go for bishop before then, right? This pawn on c4 makes your life a bit harder because you weaken your dark squares now. And if you take, we go for d5, right? And already here, black can say they're happy, at least equal, if not better, once again, because after this, knight c6, we're coming for e3, and that's a monster knight on e3 with bishop b4 coming. Okay, so then what else do they have? Well, they can try to play for knight c3, but that's not a great idea either because this bishop is blocked and this knight can be pinned. So we have d5 going for e4 very soon. The bishop is coming out to punish them, just to give you an example, right? Bishop b4 and then knight e4 is coming, and it's a disaster for white. This is not how we play chess, okay? They can try to play a3, being scared of our bishop, but come on. I already got the full pawn center. D4 is coming in soon. I got the complete pawn center. They can break the pin, but this is still fantastic for us because their knight is on the rim and we can come after their knight. This is already very hard to play for white. Okay, just to give you an example, knight c5 takes, queen a5. We pin the pawn and we come for the dark squares and this pawn. Okay, so that brings us to the other replies. Let's take their most natural move, knight d2, right? I think most people would play this in your blitz games, even classical games perhaps. The point here is that we do have e4 in a better version. Okay, we have the better version of the Figueredo gambit that I showed you earlier, right? With e4, e3, because this time they don't have the move f3. So after the knight comes here, yes, we throw the pawn away and we fork them, so they must take. And this knight is not great for this position, right? In a way, he's getting in the way of their pieces and development. So knight g4 comes in, and we get that pawn back. Is it a real gambit? Yeah, they could try to hold on to it, but come on. Really, you want to play with those pawns? Right? As for your bishop, good luck. How's he coming out? I'm not sure. So we're going to start by developing. And if they take, let's say they take, takes back, g3, d5. Once again, d5 is the main move here because our bishop gets to come out and threaten mate. If their bishop ever wants to come out, like I said, good luck. Same thing here. Good luck. Okay? They don't get to wake up their pieces today. Right? And if they don't do anything, I'm still playing b5, still bishop c5 in the air with a lot of pressure on f2 coming in, okay, and all their dark squares collapse. Not an easy life for white. So my engine already gives this equality, right? Leela likes this. I usually use Leela with some help from Stockfish. Leela likes all these gambit ideas for black because it's saying that we have an easier time developing and casting than they do. And it's very easy to win this for black, right? You have way better winning chances than in the normal lines, right? Where they play the English, the boring English double fianchettos. By the way, if they try for the double fianchetto with g3 and bishop g2, you can still go for the same triangle. Totally playable, right? Now, what if they play for c3? Well, I mean, I can play normal developing moves with knight c6 and d5, and this knight cannot stop me. They can't get their usual English business with c4 anymore, right? Just to give you a taste for it, knight c6, g3, d5, and I would say black is already better once again. Our bishops come out more harmoniously than theirs, right? And what else do they have? because here knight g5 is not a move, right? Knight d4 is fours. This is all fours. This is all fours. After knight g4, they don't have knight c4, right? Already here, I like my position, but you should know the critical line of this whole refutation, which is bishop takes. If they're very smart cookies, your opponents may find takes, takes, and knight d4, followed by b4. So they can play it now or later. So b4 right away is kind of annoying. Okay, this is the only problem that I found while looking at this. Okay, uh, so the point here is if they play a normal move, we can trade off the knight. This is their good knight. And even though our pawns may be broken, we have all the dark squares. It reminds me of some sort of Champolsky variation, right? Where our pawns are broken, but we have the bishop pair. We got a very strong center. The bishop is coming out here. Rook is coming out here. We can also play bishop d6. And they can't play their English business with c4. We stop them with our queen. Okay? This knight is awkward. Their bishop can't hurt me. And we have the attack. We're taking over the initiative. Okay, so that's if they play a normal move, which most people will, by the way. Right? Even if they break your pawns, you should be happy with bishop takes f6. And the only annoying thing is b4. Okay, so this is a very weird idea. It's an engine idea after all, right? Only the computer plays moves like that. And the point is that after queen takes, not rook b1, which would give us a great position, but c3. They're using the lack of our development, right? And if we take, that's not a great idea. So the best we have is to go back. Okay, now they get to take this pawn, which looks a bit scary. I mean, I have a queen out, they have two knights, but it's not a big deal because after knight d7, they can't take here because this pawn is weak, so they have broken pawns as well. And very soon I'm going to kick out that knight and get my bishop on the long diagonal. So we're saying that the bishop pair makes up for our weakened pawns. Our king will be totally safe here. They cannot checkmate me, right, because of f5. My knight is coming into the center, and we're doing perfectly fine here, okay? Um, Maybe b6, bishop b7, but I would be more inclined towards bishop b6, just normal, quick development, all right? And then we're surviving. So white gives a slight advantage. Like, so if you ask the computer will say, oh, okay, they're slightly better. But with the bishop pair, I would say I'm quite happy with this position, even if it's a slight advantage for white, okay? So that brings us back to any other options they have. The last thing I want to show you today is queen d2, okay? Because all the other moves like knight fd2, surely this cannot be critical. Surely they're not serious about this move. After simple development, we can go for the center right away or later on. d5, and we refuted their whole idea. If we can get both pawns here safely, we're doing great, right? If they take here, thanks for your bishop, I guess. And if you decide to do that, that's not so great for you. Okay. So that's why we're playing d5. And if they take, then great. I mean, I can take with the queen, and I'm perfectly fine as well. Okay. There is this idea with knight c3, but then we're still playing d5, taking, and they have to play e4 if they want to fight for the center. We go back with our queen. They wake up their bishop, but then rook d8, and the pin is what matters. I told you earlier this knight is very awkward, right? They can't castle anymore. Even if their bishops are starting to see the light of day, they try to break the pin on their knight so they can castle, but I get the first bishop g4, double exclam, okay? Distract the queen. If they take, I'm winning over here. And if they don't take, then okay, good luck developing, right? So after bishop g4, knight c6, we're already doing great. Okay, that leaves us with one last critical move, which is queen d2. The only game I could find here on the Leech's database said queen c7, and it ended in a win for black, but I wasn't impressed. I don't think black got such a great position. After c4, I think white is better actually, because they get to double fianchetto and get their English business again, right? So how do we avoid the English business? We're actually happy with this endgame. Okay, just to give you an example, knight takes, knight c6, and it's not so easy for white to develop here, right? Um, at some point, I'm thinking about pushing, but the main thing is for now I can keep the pawns as they are and say that this pawn is a target. Okay, so we have knight b4 in the air, bishop f5 coming in, an easy development for us. So e3, bishop e7, and what do they do here? That's the question. What's a natural move for white? I would be tempted to move the bishop, but let's say you play something like this. Surprise, black is better. Okay. Same thing after bishop d3, knight b4, and the bishop doesn't have many good squares, right? Because I'm hitting him and c2 at the moment, right? And I'm happy to trade them off over here. And c2 is still weak. If they try to defend, I always have a2. So it's a really awkward place for white to be in, okay? They can try to castle, but with that open c file and bishop f5, knight d4 coming, I'm really liking black's position here, okay? So we castle normally, their bishop is shut out of the game. They don't get to have the fun in that Nimzo-Larsen attack that they're used to, okay? Because they can't fire at g7. And that's it. That's where I want to leave you off because any move for them, like let's say they play bishop, um, let's go bishop b5. Okay, bishop f5. And once again, good luck with this pawn. If you try to play here, maybe I'll get sneaky and stop you from castling, right? I can also steal your bishop pair. So this is also good for black. If they play bishop c4, same thing, knight b4. You didn't stop me, okay? So we have easy development with our pieces, castle short, rook e8, knight b4, and they do not. They have to find some awkward way to defend their c pawn with rook c1 and try to develop then. Okay, and most importantly, like I said in this whole video, they stop their English business with the double fianchettos and the press on the center in hyper modern fashion. So I hope you can use this in your games. Let me know in the comments if you found something interesting here, or if you'd like me to analyze any of the other openings that you guys play, and I'll be happy to take a look and make another video. All the best.